Today's video is on how every parent is like John the Baptist, preparing the way of the Lord for the Lord with their children. Here's how. The human heart and how it is formed determines a lot, a very, very, very lot of how we relate to God throughout our lives. How our hearts are conditioned and formed while we're growing up determines so much of how we respond to God. And that conditioning lasts a lifetime in the absence of God's grace and other intentional efforts to change it, which requires objectivity and thought and metacognition and a lot of things that a lot of people don't do. So wisdom dictates that we pay attention to how hearts are being formed as children are growing up. For a million other reasons, not just this one. Okay? But the one I'm talking about is the fact that how a child's heart is conditioned is going to affect how they interact and respond to God for the rest of their lives. Here's how parents are like John the Baptist in that process. Parents and other caregivers and other authorities in children's lives, but mostly parents, they are the major formers of children's hearts. They are the major factors in how children's hearts are formed. Okay? So if a parent keeps that in mind, let's see how I'm forming my child's heart every day, day after week after month after year after decade, right? Usually 2 decades. If they keep that in mind, how I'm forming my child's heart is how my child is going to relate with God the rest of their life. They'll be highly intentional about how they do it. Okay? So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of details, but that's it. So specifically 2 ways, and I've touched on these in other videos, but there are 2 ways specifically, there's more than 2, but there's 2 ways mostly, okay, that a child's heart should be formed in order to respond to God well. Their hearts need to be conditioned to trust and to receive love. Because those 2 factors play more into our relationship with God than any other. It's just a fact. They also play into our relationships with everybody else around us, okay, which is extremely important as well. But for our purposes today, and even more importantly, we're talking about how those 2 factors play into how we relate to God, okay? God is love. Well, let's back up. Trust. Trust is the doorway into love. Okay, you cannot live in real, authentic, comprehensive love with someone that you don't trust. I challenge you to try. It's impossible. Same goes with us and God. You can't do it. If you don't trust God, and further, if you're not able to trust God because your heart was never conditioned to be able to trust, you're going to have a lot of trouble receiving love from God. It's just a fact. So, parents' number 1 job with their kids should be to be trustworthy so that kids' hearts are conditioned to trusting. Therefore, when God approaches them and comes into their lives, their automatic, usually subconscious response will be trust, as opposed to distrust. Okay? When God comes to somebody, the proper response is always trust, because he's completely 100% trustworthy, right? But if a heart is not conditioned to trust, then it won't know how to trust, and it will be much more difficult for God to break in there. Not impossible, but it'll be much more difficult, okay? You might not think this is important, but This is why God sent John the Baptist. He was trying to prepare people's hearts and minds for the coming of Jesus. Okay? It's the same principle. It's the same thing. Okay? So number one job for a parent to their child is to teach them how to trust. Why? Because trust opens the door to love. Trust is always the doorway into love. If you know how to trust God, you can live in love with God. If you know how to trust others, you can live in love with them. It's a prerequisite. There has to be trust in order for there to be love. If there's no trust, there can't be love. Not real, thorough, comprehensive love, lasting love, not authentic love. There can be acts of love, but no loving relationship if there's no trust. Okay? So, the number two thing is conditioning your children's hearts to receive love. After we condition their hearts, you condition their hearts to trust by being trustworthy. You condition their hearts to receiving love. How do you do that? By loving them consistently. Okay? Conditioning a heart to receive love happens. Well, let's back up. Why is that important? Because God is love. He can't do anything that's not loving. Everything God does is loving because he is love. Okay? Therefore, every single action that God ever takes will be love. Period. In your children's lives. Okay? If a human heart is not conditioned to receiving love, they're not going to be very good at it, and they're not going to know how to do it, and it's going to be difficult for them to receive his love. It's just a fact. So, number two job for parents is to condition their children's hearts to receive love. How? By loving them well, authentically, comprehensively, consistently, for years. It's a well-known fact that human beings get conditioned to whatever situations and circumstances and life experiences happen to them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Good or bad. We always get conditioned to what happens to us over and over and over. We are just that way. We are able to be conditioned and we adapt. So, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we will adapt and learn to live with whatever happens to us consistently, especially as children, because we're malleable and impressionable and we're still forming. Our bodies are forming, so our hearts and our minds and our wills and emotions, our insides are forming, right? So, parents, modeling yourself after God, how God loves us with comprehensive, real love, not just the fake, shallow human definitions of it. I'll give a definition of comprehensive love in the next video, maybe an upcoming video, maybe not the next one. We love our kids that way every day, day in, day out, for weeks and months and years and years and years, till they grow up, right? What happens? Their hearts are conditioned to receiving love. When they are approached with God, it's normal to them and they automatically do it. Thank you and have a nice day. This is how parents are just like John the Baptist.